The story I really wanted to fit in this afternoon, and that is about what's been happening in the West End. And it's being tagged the real West End drama, and it's over these gender-neutral toilets. I don't know if anyone has seen that Cabaret is taking place in the West End at the moment. It's got Eddie Redmayne and a couple of other people in there as well. And Jessie Buckley's in there as well. Brilliant, Jessie Buckley. And it's at the Playhouse Theatre. And apparently they've changed their toilets to be gender neutral, so therefore it's one toilet for absolutely everyone. But apparently there have been complaints, some theatre goers saying that women have no choice but to pass men using urinals to reach cubicles. And obviously, you know, Cabaret, the show itself, sort of deals with the themes of gender not being particularly fixed, and I sort of see where the venue's coming from here, in as much as they're solving the problem of who uses which toilet based on how people identify by saying, well, everyone uses the same one. But of course there are many people, mainly women, who are very unhappy with that. Sheila Gray is one of them. She said the toilets completely ruined the show for her, and that someone spoke to her rudely. Another person said she was very disappointed, and others. But some people backed the move as well. Well, Felix Fern is the co-founder of the grassroots activism team, Trans Activism UK, joins me live here on Talk Radio. Afternoon to you, Felix.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thanks for taking the time this afternoon here on Talk Radio to discuss this with us. So, I mean, is there a fundamental problem here, in as much as I get that it's well intended and that a gender neutral toilet that's open to everyone, it solves the problem of those people who don't identify as male or female or a gender fluid or however they identify, feeling like they have their own space or feeling like they are part of a space. However, there are some people that don't want to share their toilets with different sex or genders. So doesn't it undermine those people who have a right to have their own toilet?
I mean, I suppose that would be what their concerns actually are. From my point of view, from the reading that I have done, there's no specific issue when it comes to gender neutral toilets. So it comes across that for a lot of people, it's a level of personal comfort. A lot of people don't have issues when they're on trains with single-sex toilets or their own single-sex facilities within their own homes. So I'm personally not too sure what the issue is. There have been studies done. There was one done by Cambridge. Cambridge in 2020 that showed that gender-neutral toilets tend to be more efficient for people. So one of the benefits is women benefited from it a lot because they found that the waiting times were a lot quicker. Using them with children was a lot quicker. So the simulations they did show that generally gender-neutral toilets are quite helpful for everyone, regardless of the trans issue.
And I understand that. I think the issue here is the fact that women are actually encountering those who present as men in the same toilet. I take what you're saying. If it's a toilet on a train, or if it was, as I've seen in some bars as well, that, you know, you have a line of individual toilets for one person at a time, I don't know if that many people have problems with that. It's the fact that everyone's in the same toilet together. So women are having to walk past men are walking past women might be queuing outside the cubicle while men are over there using a urinal. It's that's the problem. And surely you recognise, because I get it, you know, I understand why some people who might present with different gender identities might need to be accounted for in some of this, but I completely understand why a woman might not want to walk past a man who's using a urinal to get to a loo.
Yeah, I totally get that. Personally, not everyone is going to agree with me on this, but personally, I don't actually see the point for urinals. To me, in an ideal world, all toilets would be gender neutral with private spaces, so everyone has a cubicle. I'm a trans man. I use men's toilets or disabled toilets because I'm also a wheelchair user. But before I was a wheelchair user, I'm not the biggest fan of walking past random men using urinals either. But at the same time, no one's looking. You don't see anything. And if you do, I'm a bit worried about anyone who's looking that closely, regardless of their sex. No one should be gawking at men at urinals.
No, I mean, I think I mean, look, I'm with you. I think a urinal is a horrible invention. I even think the word is absolutely horrible. It's just such a horrible word, urinal. It's just such a horrible, horrible word. I don't like them because of the splashback as well. I don't know whether sometimes when you maybe I'm going into too much detail, but also though, there is the argument, isn't there, that, and I don't want to be sexist here, but I might be, in as much as toilet habits. If I've ever been so desperate, or I've been in a gay club or something like that, and I've used the ladies' toilets, accompanied, and you sort of get a gay pass sometimes to do that, they have been a million times nicer and cleaner, and they smell nicer and they're fresher than the men's loo. And so isn't there that argument that some women, it's fair to say, even if there were just a load of cubicles with no urinals, a lot of women don't want to use a loo after a man because some men's aim isn't brilliant, some men's aim on the floor isn't brilliant.
I wish I'd had your experiences of women's toilets. So I started transition like over 13 years ago. So I've had that weird perspective of having to use both men's, women's, gender neutral, disabled toilets. I've used every toilet under the sun. I wish I could say and endorse this idea that women's toilets, these wonderful, clean, magical places, but some women's toilets are the absolute worst I have ever seen. So in my opinion, men and women are just as bad as each other. So I can totally get the idea.
I completely disagree with that. Women can't. The way in which a woman goes to the toilet, it's very unlikely that she can aim in a way that's going to make the outside of the toilet dirty.
God, I wish that were true. Some of the things I have seen. I don't want to go into the very gross details of this time of day, but
no, I'm sorry, I disagree with that. I think women's toilet habits are inevitably better. Isn't there also, though, an argument to say that women, because there's a lot of people who discuss this at the moment, talking about women's safe spaces, women wanting to feel safe in certain spaces, wanting to know that when they go into a woman's toilet, they are not going to encounter someone who has male body parts, right? Isn't that fair and reasonable that women should expect that? Because I'm not saying that someone who is trans by any means might be an aggressor. I think that's highly unlikely. But there will be, unfortunately, some men who will take advantage of the fact that there might be different gender identities in that toilet, and that is a legitimate thing for women to be scared about.
So that's kind of a multi-nuanced issue. There's a few different issues there that, to me, explain why it's not a big safeguarding issue, though I can absolutely empathize and understand why some people do think that way. So on the one hand, you simply cannot tell if someone is trans. There are people who, like butch-presenting cis women, who have been accosted in public toilets for looking masculine. There was a lady on Twitter who posted earlier this month about the fact that she was using a train toilet in the women's toilets, and a man went after her and started banging on the door and shouting at her to come out because she was in the wrong toilet because she looked masculine. That, to me, is far scarier to women using toilets.
But isn't that as a result of the fears around self-ID? And if self-ID didn't exist, then those fears wouldn't be out there.
Well, no, because trans people have been using the gendered spaces that are appropriate to them for decades. It's something that has come up and has become a big talking point, especially in online spaces, that I think has boiled up fear. Someone plants an idea of this scary thing, like the idea of people saying, well, it's not trans people we're worried about, it's men pretending to be trans going into spaces. For one thing, we have no evidence that that's a big thing that's happening. And also,
but it has happened. There have been cases of people who present physically as men, who claim that their gender identity is female, who do so in a sinister way in order to get access to women's prisons, in order to get access so that they have for sinister intentions. Now, I take what you're saying, that there isn't, it's not common every single day, but it has happened.
What is far more common statistically is the amount of cis men that are a danger to people everywhere. Statistically, the vast majority of people who do cause crimes and violent actions, especially against women, are cis men. So how are we going to protect them in everyday life? We can't say, well, there's a few bad things that have happened with these bad eggs, therefore we must put these new special measures in place that may end up harming everyone overall, when no one's saying, well, what about men in general? What would your plan be to segregate women from men? Because if you're going by things that have happened and actual crime cases, surely that's far scarier than a few bad trans people.
Well, I think that the issue is, though, that women are being expected to be able to... Well, there's all sorts to this, and you're quite right when you say it's really nuanced and there's a lot to it. Women have had to deal with the male body parts being a tool of repression for them for centuries. I think that's a fair comment to make. And so I think that there is an issue here about perception of safety. And I take what you say. I think that it's a fair point to say that it doesn't always translate into the statistics around how safe they are. But I don't think that makes a difference to women who have had real worries about perception of safety, especially when you consider women who might then sort of be catcalled walking along the street, women who face men who might be trying to talk to them all day of the week. And I think there is a perception that, fine, I could go into a loo, it's some respite from all of that. Now, not all men are like that. Lots of men are lovely, but I think that is the perception that women have. And so I think the fear is that this idea then that there might be someone who presents as male in front of them in that space, that they then have to say, oh, I have to be accepting of this because that person might identify as a woman, or that person therefore might need to be accepted in this space. I think there lies the problem, because it's about the perception that a woman, based on decades, centuries of history, needs that area that is just hers.
I think the perception is a very good word to use in these circumstances, because it's something that changes with time, and the things that we see as different and therefore potentially unsafe changes. Do you know how toilets became segregated, male and female?
No, tell me.
So late 1800s is around the time that women started to get into the workplace. There was far more textile manufacturing. Suddenly, men's only spaces were not for men anymore. And the reason that women's segregated toilets came about, before that, most people, especially in the US, used the same toilets. The reason that they were changed is because women were seen as less than. Women weren't just different physically, it wasn't just a genital thing, but women's minds were seen as less than. They were seen as hysterical, they were weak, and therefore they should be in a separate place. They should not be using the same privileged places that men should be using. So all of the toilet segregation has come from a place of misogyny or difference. If you then go on, there's been more toilet segregation. There's been black and white segregation. There's been gay segregation after World War II, going all the way decades into the 80s, of gay men being treated as unsafe.
And I take what you're saying, that, okay, the intent behind them might have been about some negative segregation, but if the result has been that women have felt safer as a result of it, well, then that's still the result that has come of it.
That's only now, though. Women haven't always felt safe as a result of segregation. You can't say, well, we did this bad thing, but eventually people felt okay. You can't say, well, let's segregate trans people. They might feel bad about it now, but maybe one day they'll get used to it and that'll become society. If you keep segregating people, how far are you going to go? Who are you going to segregate next? Who gets to say, this is the person I find unsafe and scary? Who gets to say that?
Because I'll go back to it. If I was a woman, you know, if I think about my niece, and look, I get it. I understand those people with different gender identities. There needs to be a solution found to this. I absolutely understand that. But when I think about my young niece, I would worry about her going into a toilet when she's young and encountering someone who looks like a fully grown man. I would, because not everyone's nice. But doesn't mean that they're trans. It's actually nothing to do in my mind with someone being trans, because I think, as you rightfully point out, the aggressors in most of these situations are going to be men born as men, biologically men. But I feel genuinely uncomfortable with the idea of saying to a younger person, a more vulnerable person, you can go into a toilet and if you see a man in there with a big stocky man with a beard, it's fine. And I don't know how we're ever going to get away from that.
Well, some women grow facial hair. Some women have hormonal balances that result in that. Some women, like that butch woman, get perceived to be a man. So who is protecting them? Who is judging who is male and female?
Well, I think it's a third loo. I think the way in which you sort that is a third loo.
Okay, so third toilets is an interesting one. Like, I know some people are like, okay, cool, let's have male, female, gender neutral, problem sorted. Do you know what changing places is?
No.
So Changing Places is a toilet program for disabled toilets, specifically bigger, more accessible disabled toilets, because some aren't good for more severe physical or autistic needs. So it's something the government has been putting into place to get new toilets, right? They've put £30 million into this endeavor to get new, bigger toilets, not only in new buildings, but in existing buildings to fix problems that are already there, right? It took 15 years to get 1,260 toilets. The new endeavour is costing £30 million.
No, I understand that the point. So sorry, we've got to get to a break. But I understand the point you're making, that if that took that long, the thought of getting a third toilet is going to take forever. I don't think we're going to agree, but I appreciate the respectful conversation. Felix, good to talk to you. Felix Fern from Trans Activism UK. I don't know how that problem is ever going to be solved, but it's probably a debate for another day here on Talk Radio.
Talk.